What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. A little bit later today than normal. We're starting a little bit later. The sun's already going down. It's that time of the year again. It's been like negative 15 degrees every time I get out of the house. It feels like it's been terrible, but the Sixers are in full swing. We're back in action today. I'm here with Shawnee B. What's up, Sean?
Yeah, in personal news, the college career of soccer is officially over, so I can more properly put my focus
We
toward
can.
my career in pickup basketball. So things are good here. Things are good here.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I recently tied in an intramural basketball game. I didn't know you could do
Oh,
that. Pretty disappointing end, but yeah. It's
yeah.
the pickup basketball world is one of those that you once you enter, I don't think you ever leave.
Oh, yeah. I've
I
had my
wish you
toes on the edge. Had my toes on the edge for a while. I'm ready to go full swing.
yeah. Well, I wish you a very long and healthy career in your in your pickup basketball. Um so let's go into there hasn't been too much going on since we last talked on Thursday. There's a game in Indiana. They started their road trip and an ugly loss to just a really like the Pacers always do. The Pacers games, like I feel like anytime the Sixers go to Indiana, it's like my least favorite game of the year. One of my least favorites. Like I just don't like the Pacers. They're not good,
Mm.
but like the Sixers are shorthanded, so they didn't really like. And these guys are playing 40 minutes a night, trying to pick up the slack of the guys that aren't there. So they lose again after a very good Tobias game. Just tell me if you had any takeaways from Saturday night's loss in Indiana.
Yeah, great Tobias game. He looked awesome. He ended with 32 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists. The Sixers definitely missed Embiid in this one. When we think about the setup of Sabonis and Turner, one of the things that the Sixers always bank on when they're playing the Pacers is getting Turner in foul trouble and just being the physically demanding. And Drummond just wasn't quite as impactful in that regard. Uh, I think we're beginning to see a little bit of the too much Drummond isn't always a great thing, and I think that while he is definitely more of an innings eater as far as what his body can take, like I think he's better served in a change of pace off the bench role at this point in what he has. And I mean, 16 points. I mean, I'm sorry, 11 points, 16 rebounds for him. So not bad statistically, but not a lot value there from him. Another good maxi game. So that was another huge takeaway. 24 points there. He's been absurdly hot, and it's been awesome to just watch what he's done. So I guess those are my biggest three things.
Yeah, man. Maxi has been great. And like again, we've talked about this. I feel like we gush over him every time that we talk, but like it's really hard to not at this point.
Yeah.
Like he's just been so incredible. And I wrote an article about him on yesterday. And man, like he's at over the last four, like this last week, 26 points per game. I mean, I was playing like almost 40 minutes a night, which is insane. But on like 3.5 attempts from three, he's shooting 50%. He's shooting like 93% from the line over the last like 5 games. Like he's just doing everything that we were like, okay, he's not that great at this yet. He's just improved on so much, and there's still some like growing pains at times. Like you see that there's a little bit of hesitancy. He's a lot better shooting the three off the dribble than like the catch and shoot, unless he's like really going into it. But when you let him loose, he's just a really fun player to watch. And Tobias had an incredibly efficient, good night, and like a quiet like I didn't get to watch the full game. I missed a little bit of the first half, but I know he had a big first half, and
Took over
I'm
early.
just
They wouldn't have been in the game remotely if he wasn't there early on, as he pretty much scored everything for him in the first half of the game, really.
which is really nice to see him get back like his footing underneath him again. Because it was like a little bit of a misstep at the early on, his first game back. But man, I really need to see this team full strength again. Like they're really going into the late nights. We're getting on the road trip. Like they don't play till 10 tonight. They don't play till 10:30 on Thursday. It's gonna be one of those weeks, and they go into next week and they play late again. So I just hoping for Embiid and Matisse to get and DG to get back soon, because it's been like kind of painful to see them go through this stretch, like where they were in a lot of games. They played a lot of the games, especially early on in this stretch, like really tough. Um, but they're just not talented enough or deep enough without those guys.
Yeah, and one more thing on Drummond. He shot 4 of 12 from the field and didn't really step outside the paint. He's the sixth percentile among centers for finishing around the rim, and all stuff that is hard to do and just honestly impressively bad with that. But uh, somehow I don't even know my full like feeling on Drummond is like when you watch him, like he's not particularly bad. He's definitely not standout good either. But we are getting the full Drummond experience, and while we have harped on like the how great Drummond has been over Dwight Howard with that, I would also like to think back to just at this time last year how we were hyping up how great Dwight Howard is for this team and that. So I think I'm pressing a little bit of the relax button on the Drummond hype, and I'm still happy with what he's done, and he's been fine and moving up in the starting role. But I'm looking forward to him coming back into as a change of pace guy.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was bound to happen though. Like with Embiid missing as much time as he
Oh yeah,
has, and like we expected the occasional Drummond start, and in the occasional Drummond starts, it feels like it's going to be refreshing and like okay, we have a decent backup and a guy that can step in. But getting a full dose of Andre Drummond is like from this, so we've always known this. From the full dose of Andre Drummond is sometimes a little bit too much, and understandably so. And we're just like really, really need Embiid back. And we were just talking about it before we started recording. So they go on a road trip here. Jazz tonight, Nuggets on Thursday. Then they play the Blazers, Kings, Warriors to close it out. And from what we're looking at now, Embiid tested positive for COVID on the 8th of November, you said. So
yeah.
10 days from then would be Thursday. So there's some potential for him to play on Thursday. But most likely, I feel like he'll come back against the Trailblazers because there was some complications apparently with the COVID or just him dealing with the symptoms pretty heavily. But they embark on this road trip now, and there's, I mean, obviously more drama again coming from this side of the media, and I don't even know what to make of this anymore. But the Sixers ended up finding Ben Simmons again for not coming on this road trip. He's been seen doing individual workouts at St. Joe's, and you tweeted about that today. So just give me an update on what you're seeing from Ben and the Sixers team right now.
Yeah, so there's a couple things on this. The root of the finding and why it's back in place is Ben has not given the Sixers any sort of documentation for the help that he's been given, and that's the root of Maury's continued finding is that just if this was any type of physical injury, like we would be checking in with your physical therapist and checking in with this, and that by your contract, if you still want to get paid, you're still a part of the Sixers, and we just need that documentation. He has refused to go under Sixers, their mental health specialist, and wants to do his own, which he got through the Players Association, which is valid. But if you want to do that, you have to provide documentation, and he's yet to do that. So I think it's fair game for the Sixers to find him. And once again, like it sucks, but this is also like as much as it's like a mental health first, like this also I look at as like it's so easy to just forward a paper, forward an email along, and I think there is like an active kind of communication barrier in why this isn't progressing. So that's the biggest thing. He missed the road trip, didn't travel with the team. He's going to be fined $2.3 million, assuming that he doesn't show up to any of these 6 games. So another chunk of the paycheck there. He's working out at St. Joe's, apparently pulling up in his Rolls Royce parked in student parking. So super low profile. Working out behind closed doors. Nobody's really got a glimpse of it other than in and out of the gyms, and I don't really know. It definitely seems like the paths are going on two opposite directions, and I don't see them ever fully coming together. But I think the fines are going to keep coming until Simmons shows some sort of willingness to work with the team, and until that happens, I think this is what we're going to look at.
Yeah, and it feels like there was like a point in time, there was like a very brief point in time where it was like, okay, it kind of looked like they were lining up together, or at least be parallel again, and that quickly came and went. It
Yeah,
did not last. That feeling did not last very long. So it's a shame that it's gotten to this point again, and it's a shame that we're halfway through November, and this is something that we were talking about in August, September, and I mean obviously well before that, but like really getting into like, oh, is he or is he not going to come back and play, and like this is really still the conversation that we're having. So it definitely sucks. I try to see both sides on this. But like you said, man, it especially from like an agent perspective, from Rich Paul's perspective, depending on who you're dealing with and who you're representing and everything, don't you think it would make sense to like make sure that Ben is getting like his documentation or the things that he's going through, whatever, like he is actually like, whether he's going through therapy or whatever he's doing, like, wouldn't that be like a priority of yours to make sure that the team is getting that information and that team is able to see that so he's not getting fined more? Like, I don't really get the barrier between it.
yeah. I mean, the Sixers certainly aren't blameless in this situation as a whole, but in the recent events, they really have done nothing wrong. And I do have a legitimate issue with the way that Rich Paul is like twisting things. Like we didn't talk about the article that he just posted the other day. and which was through Shams' ear. Shams posted it, but it's pretty much Rich Paul's words. And the one excerpt from it here, and this is a quote directly from Rich Paul, is, quote, "I truly believe the fines, the targeting, the negative publicity shined on the issue. That's very unnecessary and has furthered the mental health issues for Ben. Either you help Ben or come out and say he's lying. Which one is it?" And to me, like, I understand
That's
you
a weird thing to say.
right. I understand you have Ben's best interest in mind, that you're just trying to do whatever to get him out of Philadelphia, but you're driving such an unnecessary rock here. And like, it's tough for the Sixers. The Sixers, their biggest request here is just show me the documentation that you are getting this help and improving. And that's such a simple task. And until that happens, like, I really feel like you have no bone to pick, Rich Paul.
Yeah, yeah. And also at the end of the day, I feel like if this was, the public part of all this was going to be what drove it past the limit of like him actually dealing with all this stuff. Like, and again, there's no doubt in my mind that there is, some things going on, like there, and for the right reasons, and like understandably so. But like, if the publicity was what was really making everything worse, like they have done the worst job imaginable in terms of keeping this private. Like, I feel like if there was some, like, if they came in and were like, "Hey, he's been going through a lot. Obviously, a lot happened, and he needs some time. He needs 20 games. He needs 30 games. He needs, this part of the season. You know what I mean? Like, if they came in and just said something like that, and we're like, we just need to keep this private. Tell people, here's what's going on. He is, going to keep to himself. I feel like that would have just been a much more viable and like reasonable option for both sides. And instead, it's become this like pissing contest where they're going to say, you guys should call him out. And then they're just going to make a shitstorm over the fact that the Sixers are trying to plea that Simmons isn't, cooperating, or potentially say that he's lying. And then on the other side, like the Sixers are like, well, you aren't helping us. You aren't helping us help you at all. So it's
Yeah.
just like this. It's just the worst situation ever.
And well, when we think back to just the origin of fine, like, what has Ben Simmons been fined for? He was fined for not showing up. So Rich Paul saying how the fines are making things worse. What has he been fined for? He's been fined for not showing up to camp in the first part. He's been fined for getting kicked out of practice. He's been fined for not going on road trips and not playing, not practicing, and not showing the documentation that should be provided if he wants to be away from the team. So this is like, you brought these fines upon yourself, is like the biggest thing. Like, and from the start, this has been what frustrated me the most about this, is like, if he just shows up and plays basketball, so much of this disappears. And I understand there still would have been, like, it wouldn't have been a flawless fit back into the Sixers and fit back into Philadelphia, but this stuff would have probably gone away by now if he just put his head down and gone to work. And instead, it continues to drag on, continues to become not a bigger deal, because I think it's pretty much capped out and what it can be as far as nationally and all that. But like, so much of this has been avoidable, and Ben Simmons has brought it upon himself that you can't play both sides in the playing the tough guy. I don't care if I get fined. I don't care about the consequences, and then say that the consequences are the issue for what's making your mental health work worse. And like, I don't want to judge what he's going on mentally, because on a human being standpoint, like, he's certainly been through stuff that, like, none of us can imagine. When we think about just
Right.
scrolling through social media, seeing the stuff that every day. I posted the video at St. Joe's, and I got people quote tweeting and saying how they're pulling up to jump him and stuff. Like, that is stuff that, like, sucks, and I can't imagine wrapping my mind around. But at the same time, it's like, you're in control of your actions for what you do as a professional. And if you just show up and do your job, so many of these like minor details, like, they just go away. It just, everything will become easier.
Yeah, or at least like just trying to like just letting the Sixers help, or like trying to work something out. And it is hard to say, like, who knows what's going on behind closed doors, but it just seems like both of them are very strong-headed and very, set in their ways. And as a player, you just can't be at this point, because you're not getting yourself anywhere and the team's not getting themselves anywhere. And I don't know, man. It seems like they're destined for I mean, it's been an ugly breakup. This is like the most toxic relationship I've ever seen in my life. And it's only gotten like worse, like you said, but it can't get, it's gotten to the point, like the point of no return at this point
Yeah.
too, because like how is he ever going to come back? How is he going to come back in August, like, let alone, come back in now after all of this? So
What do you think?
I don't know, man.
James, what do you think happens if he's here past the deadline?
Like, you mean he's not playing
Like
and he's
he's
still here?
the trade deadline comes and goes, and Ben Simmons is not traded.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I don't know because he's not gonna play, right? Like, we're assuming he's not gonna play for the Sixers ever again,
I would
right?
assume that, but I also think like Ben Simmons has plenty of money, but nobody's equipped to just be taking $2 million fines, $8 million fine. Like this guy has $35 million on the books that I'm sure he wants, and I'm sure he wants as soon as possible. And again, playing solves that. So if there is a part of me that I think Maury is willing to push that if like it gets to that point and if there's still no value. Now, in contrast, I personally feel like this team so far this year has proven enough and proven to be competitors enough that we owe it to them to get whatever we can at the deadline and make a run for it this year. I don't think we're far off enough that it's worth like scrapping the season because as it is, this team is fine, pretty good. Like we're not a championship contending team. We're missing the guy that's been relied on as our second best player for several years now. Is just simply not there, and we've had nobody to replace him. So we're not going to be as good as the Sixers are not going to be as good as they were last year or in previous years simply because of that. But if we do get like a trade piece, and I'm not, I mean, again, the market feels like it changes every day for who's available, who's not, what's true, what's not. But like if there is some sort of legitimate piece there or anything, like I think it's worth pulling the trigger and giving this team a chance to compete this year.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, I think so too. And like honestly, I would be more worried once like January hits. Like I feel like or I also trust Maury, but in the way that I feel like people are gonna see teams are gonna see the trade deadline coming around and being like the Sixers are really gonna get want to get this guy off the hook. Like they're really want to gonna move Ben here. So I honestly think that the goal is probably if they're gonna move him to move him before the middle of February, considering that like I feel like the deals or who's available or the value of that deal might go down because it is the trade deadline and teams are thinking that the Sixers probably want to get this situation over with and give their team a chance to, actually succeed down the road. So, I mean, I think this is at least going to go on into like a month from now, maybe a month from now, early
Mhm.
December. We've talked about that timeline a little bit before. So, I don't know, man. It's just, I was like, there was a really good point in time where I was like, I don't really care about Ben anymore. This team's really fun. And then like they lost four straight, and it's like everything sucks right now. So it's time to start over like talking about Ben again.
Yeah, I mean, Joel Embiid coming back will solve a lot, and I mean, it's
Yeah.
like the thing I will say about Embiid and like the biggest takeaway for so far this year is he just can't sit enough. Like when he's on the court every night, which he's done everything possible to do on his end this year, they're still contending team. They're still a threat to win every single night. Now that he's been out with COVID, which is for the most part out of his control, and like you can't blame him for certainly, is like we see the team with, and again, it wasn't just Embiid. Like this is losing without Tobias Harris, without Matisse, without Danny Green, without Isaiah Joe. There's been a lot of pieces here lost. So I'm not like I don't want to make these past what is it 5 straight losses now, like
Four,
4.
four, I think.
Okay. Like I don't want to make it out to more than it is. Like I still have faith in this team. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4. You're right. So like this team I still have trust in when everybody's back that we can compete. And like I don't want to make just as I don't want to make out more of the without Ben Simmons than it is. It's super important to note that Joel Embiid's not here. And once he's back on his team, like we're a threat to win every night once again.
Yeah, man, and also like I like realistically, I think if you even have just Matisse against the Knicks and the Bucks, or even the Raptors, like I think if you have Matisse in those games, you win. Like you don't
Hmm.
even need like obviously you want to have Joel, but like I think even if just Matisse is back in the lineup for two or three of those games, like you still come away with a couple wins during that stretch. It's just like there's too many guys, and then on top of that, like they kind of got their ass beat in Indiana, but like everyone but Tobias had been playing 40 minutes a night for the last week. Like they're if you think Andre Drummond's legs aren't tired, if you think
Yeah.
George
And he
Niang's
looked
legs
tired.
aren't feeling it, yeah, like those guys do. And like Furkan Korkmaz has been terrible. And why? Like you're telling me that doesn't have to do with the fact that he play 42 minutes a night for that week, like and now his jumpers kind of like looks short and, kind of just like throwing the ball at the rim. Like there's a reason for that. It's not just because like he had a bad night, which he does have sometimes, but like the fact that he has to play 40 minutes for, 4, 5, 6 games in a row and not really have any relief is, it definitely means something. So I don't read into it too much because I think that, like you said, obviously if they have Embiid or they have Matisse and Isaiah Joe and Danny Green and all these guys back, it makes a massive difference and they look like an entirely different team. And, they even held their own without those guys. So yeah, I'm definitely not worried.
Yeah, no, 100%. And rest up Danny Green. I would rest him for a while now. You don't like the hamstrings to be lingering like that, and especially at his seasoned age. So let him
Yeah,
rock for
for
a
sure.
while. Let's keep the young guys rotating as long as everybody's back and healthy, and have DG for playoff time if we need him.
Uh, yeah, let me ask you a question because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. With like obviously with the emergence of Tyrese and what he's been able to do and like what he's consistently been able to do because we fell in love with the potential and like the flashes last year and then even through the first handful of games this year we're like okay he by the end of the year he's gonna be awesome and he had one game last year the Nuggets game where it was like oh shit like he can really hoop. And now it's
Yeah,
been every single game where he's been the top priority offensively. And even on Saturday against Indiana when he was the second, what do you score? 24. Like
24.
if
Yeah.
he will do that. He will continue to do that. I have no doubt in my mind about it. Like he's going to continue scoring because that's what he does, and he attacks when he needs to. When you're looking at this team, Seth is great, Maxi is great, Tobias is very good, and then Embiid is Embiid. I think the biggest thing you need to change is Danny Green, right? So, like, if you're looking at who maybe a trade partner or whatever it is, like, are you looking more for a wing than you are for a guard, or a guy that can replace Danny Green in this lineup?
I mean, I still have not held out hope that the Sixers, what I think they're lacking in like a true, I think it's pretty clear what they're lacking in like a true contending spirit is just like that top level talent. So I'm still willing to throw the house at whatever it takes to get somebody to pair with Joel Embiid. And I'm talking the Dame Lillards, the maybe Jalen Browns, the Bradley Beal, that stratosphere of player is kind of what like I still think we need to become a championship, and it can be done if we fully cater to Embiid as well. And like what we look at kind of the Bucks model with how they've built around Giannis with that kind of thing. As far as Danny Green, I think Danny Green was very much a Ben Simmons addition. Is that just stand out on the wing, hit the three when it's got to you, play a little defense, do nothing more. That's what he's best at. And I think Danny Green lately has just been doing too much. Danny Green is great at just being Danny Green, he's been the prototypical 3-and-D guy his entire career. Like literally when you think of a 3-and-D guy, it is Danny Green. And he's been trying to put the ball on the floor, dribble, pass the ball, do all that, just stand in the corner and shoot. And that's what you do. And I think when he gets back to that, when we have full bodies, and like all this, like I'm not as worried about him long term. I think like he's a fine player to have in a playoff rotation. Uh, as far as what I'm approaching, I still as far as Maxi goes, I think there's growth to do in both areas, but improvements needed in both areas too. Like I think he's shown a lot on both ends. He's still not quite good enough to be a grade A distributor. If we do add a wing, I would prefer to add like a veteran point guard, kind of like the George Hill mold, but hopefully somebody that actually kind of sticks this time and is effective. But I do think like a wing creator would probably be the best case scenario for a guy that becomes available.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think like when I look at this team and what they're weak, like I have a ton of respect for DG and what he does and what he brings to the game because I think a lot of these things that he does do goes a little bit under the radar with the way that this team is perceived and just him in general. I think he's been incredibly important to 3 championship teams, and sometimes doesn't get enough credit for it. But like he is old. Like it's really evident that he is getting up there in age. It's really evident that the things are coming around. Like he's a 35-year-old and he's playing the three essentially at this point now. And it's like I don't know. When I look at a championship team, I don't see him as your starting small forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And like that
I agree with
changes with
that.
like that probably ends up changing depending on what ends up happening with Simmons, and he wouldn't be playing the three if Simmons was here. Like he'd be technically playing the two offensively, or whatever.
Yeah,
Is hard to. There's no
there's
such
no
real thing, but
positions.
like
There's no
I'm
position anymore.
I'm even thinking about like I'm genuinely thinking about this because I had this conversation, and I've never really been like a huge Buddy Hield guy. And like this is not to like be like, oh, the Sixers need Buddy Hield. But that man is shooting 10 threes per game and shooting 41% and 28 minutes a game. Like if someone on the Sixers were doing that, we would be losing our minds.
Yeah.
Like think about what we would be saying about a player that was averaging 18 points per game, making 4 out of every 10 threes that he takes every single night. Like we would be losing it. And I just like I don't know. He's there's a lot of guys out there that do things like on a much higher efficiency and a much better manner than Danny Green does. And I just think like as much as I liked him coming back, especially on a team friendly deal, I thought he might get a little bit more. Like sometimes he just doesn't do enough for me. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the Buddy Hield thing, I was a huge pro Buddy Hield guy, throwback to the lockdown time. And then also this offseason, I think the Lakers had a major miss electing to get Russell Westbrook over Buddy Hield from a roster construction standpoint. It's just that would have been a much better fit if you're really truly trying to capitalize, and we'll see how that turns out. But on the Sixers end, I think best case scenario, Green as a starter is kind of a courtesy starter. It's a you can go in with the starters, lead off the game, maybe play some crunch time, but you're not logging the bulk of the minutes. And I mean, that's kind of been his role here all last year too. Like there were many games early in the year last year where he was playing like 10, 15 minutes a game and just kind of letting the young guys go. I think that's what would happen in playoffs if that happened now, if that happens down the stretch, if he still is in roster. He's not meant to be shouldering heavy minutes at this stage in his career. And I mean, I think even from last year, he's lost a little more of a step. And I mean, some of it's the hamstring. Him running with a little bit of hamstring, him running in general is hilarious. And then him with the hamstring injury just did not look remotely coordinated out there. So get him healthy. I'm okay if Danny Green is here. I'm not heartbroken if he's lost, but I do think he'll be fine in playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like, oh, we need to move him, oh, he needs to go, but I just think when I think about a championship roster, like I don't see a player that's so limited in what they do starting the way that Danny Green does. And he's just like to me, he's been very limited. And again, like that is his role, and it makes a little bit more sense when Simmons is around, like you said. But I was just thinking, kind of just thinking out loud. Just
Yeah, no.
I've been thinking a lot about it.
I mean, I think from the Sixers' perspective, the hope was with the Danny Green that Matisse would be ready to step into that role. Honestly, probably by this year was the hope. And that hasn't quite happened with just the offensive development in Matisse. And I mean, Matisse can be Danny Green on steroids if he gets good at it, which just when you think about the defensive instincts, what he can bring. Early on in his career, Danny Green was an excellent defender. And uh,
Oh, yeah.
obviously losing a few steps has mattered greatly in a guy that's primarily a perimeter defender. His hands are still excellent with getting steals, poking the ball out. There's a couple in the post that he's been dropped down and just swooped around and poked out this season. Like he's not a zero outside of just shooting. It's just I do think they're in need of the shots that he throws up, and like Matisse doesn't quite provide that. I think if Matisse was ready, that this would be his spot 100%.
Yeah, yeah, and I can definitely see that, and hopefully, I mean, I hope that that ends up happening sooner rather than later. And it really felt like Matisse was making strides in the right direction early on the season before he went out with COVID, because that was
Mhm.
just like that took a put a wrench in everyone's plans. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes the rest of this year. Depending on how everything goes with Ben, but then also just like in general, I feel like they could make a switch like that. I also feel like Doc's kind of stubborn and like won't make a switch unless he like literally has to, like the situation he's been put into now. But kind of aside from the point, I just wanted to throw that out there. But the Sixers embark on they left for Indiana on Saturday. Now they're in Utah tonight. Then they're in Denver. Then they're in Portland. Then they're in Sacramento, and then they're in San Francisco after that. So they're on a little bit of a difficult stretch here. The Jazz are a good team. The Nuggets are a good team. Trailblazers are not a good team. The Kings are terrible, and the Warriors are playing like the best team in the league without Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
So let's run through this. Uh, there's it's hard to tell because there's potential for Embiid to return during this trip. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back until later.
Mhm.
But just walk me through this. What do you see as the results for these games?
Yeah, not a great stretch of games for the Sixers looking ahead. I mean,
Uh,
the Jazz, I would love a little Drummond getting into it with Gobert and making his I guess just bigness useful and making something happen there. I don't think the Jazz are a great team. I think the Sixers have a chance tonight. Maybe a Georges Niang revenge game would be nice. But I think more than likely they probably lose this one. The Nuggets, uh, if they get Embiid back, I think they probably lose this one. I think they're losing this one too. Jokic has been incredible so far this year, and minus the reckless attack on Marcus Morris. But other than that, he's been great. Trailblazers, that's a shot to niche a win. I also think those guys are due to break out. Like, they're not as bad of a team as they have been playing so far this year. So I don't look at that as like an easy game either. The Kings game, they should win. That's probably the only one I will say is like should be win. But also like De'Aaron Fox has been terrible so far this year, and I think he's due to snap out of that too. There's been some whispers of him and Halliburton not working together, which if either one of those needs to be squeezed out, give Daryl Morey a phone call. But I do think they're a better team than they're showing too. And then Warriors. So I guess my formal prediction, I'm going 1-4 in here, which I don't feel great about, but that's probably how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it depends. If you get Embiid back, I think you definitely have a chance the rest of
Yeah,
the way out.
2-3 is
Um,
probably a win on the road trip.
yeah, and the Warriors are really incredible, honestly. Steph is just awesome to watch. He's been great. I hate Utah.
Yeah,
I've really eased up on a lot of my hatred for teams and players over the years. I've definitely I used to be just like a fireball with that. I just like hate everyone. But the one hate that's never faded is the Utah Jazz. So it's always terrible to watch them in Utah because it's late at night. I feel like they never win. Um, and yeah, tonight will probably be a loss. Denver, again, difficult game. Trailblazers, they played them earlier this year. Did Embiid play in that game?
let me
I'm trying
look.
to remember if he
I
did.
believe he did. I'm pretty sure he did. Trailblazer. I'm pretty sure he did. No, he did not. That was Furkan, Danny Green, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, and Maxey got the nod in that one. Niang had 21
So
off the bench.
so there you go. You still have a chance, in Portland for that game. So I think if you are looking at wins in this, it is the Blazers and the Kings. Uh, dude, so let's talk about De'Aaron Fox a little bit because there's been a lot of talk about that recently.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, 2-3 is a win on this road trip, especially if Embiid doesn't get back until later. Um, but there are two winnable games in this stretch. Aside from that, uh, this can be like our last point because we have a lot more to talk about tomorrow and Thursday. So the
Mhm.
the Kings the Kings are just preparing a nightmare for themselves. I feel like they just are never ever on the same page between their front office and their coaching staff and their players. They literally just have Marvin Bagley in jail, which is like a miserable thing. I think I really hate that for him and for them. But now De'Aaron Fox is struggling, and he's at he went from 25 points per game down to 19 and a half. His field goal percentage has been way down. His three percentage has been it was never great, but he got it up to 33 last year, and then it's back down to 24. So not great for him. Is there do you see any way that he's ready to move on, or the Kings are ready to move on, depending on how they see the fit between him and Halliburton?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. He's been like bad shooting. Like, he's shooting 41.1% from the field on 18.1 attempts, 23.1% from three on 4.6 attempts, which is also a lower attempt from last year. He's going down from 5.5. I mean, the pros too of like a Fox deal, it's fully embracing Tyrese Maxey. I feel like Fox and Maxey as a backcourt just like you're really pushing your Thunder and Lightning is your Thunder with Joel Embiid in the half court, and your Lightning is Fox and Maxey and fast break and just wrecking havoc basically. And which I could see working. I don't mind that with Tobias as a nice settler and whatever you want to throw in as the third. Maybe Seth. I don't like Seth, Fox, and Maxey because it's just too small there. So maybe Matisse. I don't know. That it's not a seamless fit, but it's something to play around with. I could see the Kings starting to look into moving on. I think there's if they decide that Halliburton is kind of a more of an identity guy, then I don't think him and Fox are a seamless fit either. I don't think they're like awful together, but I think it's workable, but not ideal. So if they do see something in a bigger market, I don't think Ben Simmons is that guy either. Ben Simmons is honestly in a lot of ways like a bigger De'Aaron Fox, who he does more defensively, but Fox does a lot more offensively. So I don't think there's enough smoke to call it fire there, but who knows?
Yeah, it'll definitely be. I mean, just another storyline kind of to follow along. I could see them being part of like a three-team trade, and
Yeah,
whether that is with the
absolutely.
Sixers or not. Like, I could see there being some movement on their front, depending on. I mean, again, it's still super early. Like, I feel like the NBA is classic, and NBA fans and media are classic for overreacting this early on. What they're like
100%.
15 games in, so yeah, of course, it's gonna be like, oh, De'Aaron Fox is playing bad. Time to move on. Damian Lillard's playing bad. He's not good anymore. All these things. Everything's gonna kind of
Also,
go back down to the mean.
I would like to go on record as Marvin Bagley is not a good basketball player, and as
Yeah,
much
man,
as
but he's
like
not even getting a shot there.
yeah, he also they told him to check in the other game, and he said no. So I
Oh,
partially
wow.
feel bad for him. Partially is this is another mess situation, but there should be no team looking to build a trade around getting Marvin Bagley at this point.
No, but, like, the last thing I saw was, they got blown out by, like, 30, and, like, he was a DNP coach's decision, and it's like, you can't even let him get
Yeah,
in for, like, some
I don't
like,
remember.
downplay minutes, I don't know,
I don't remember what game it was. That may have been the game where they said to go in, and
maybe.
Bagley said nah.
Yeah. I mean, they've been talking about it. It's been a story for a while. It's like, just move on from him, man. It's like the same thing with, like, Kevin Porter Jr. when, like, that whole thing in Cleveland, it was like, man, just move on. Just
Yeah.
and they traded him for a second round pick, and it's like, it's probably like the second round pick's probably better than the headache that was gonna be caused within the locker room there. So,
Mhm.
sometimes it's better just like, or just cut him, man. If you're not gonna trade him, but you're never gonna play him, just cut him. Like,
A
I
lot
don't
of
know.
people
It
are
just
saying the
seems
same thing about the Ben Simmons situation, though, to be fair.
yeah, but like Ben is a 3-time All-Star and defensive player of the year. Like, there's actually some value there. Like, if uh, you have a threshold of players that's like, okay, this is where you'd match the value of Ben, and like, if these players don't meet that value, you're not going to trade him. But it's like, it's Marvin Bagley, and if he's literally not playing for you, and like we said, he's not a good basketball player, like,
Cut him.
trade him for a second round pick, like, I don't, uh, for a late first, I don't know, do something at least, just like get it out of your hair. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how it goes though, because this the Sixers are in a strange position. Like you said, they've been playing really well, and when they are fully healthy, they were one of the best teams in the league up to this point. But there's definitely still it's still the thought in the back of your mind, like, they're not good enough to compete at a real level. So you know, in my mind, there is something impending. It's just about like when rather than like if. So I don't know. I'm just like, I just want them to be back healthy so I can see, like, again, what they really have, because we only got like a 4-game stretch of that, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mentally prepared to lose this road trip already. Uh, I generally don't. I generally really don't care that much about the regular season and statistically standings wise where we really end up. There's such a drastic change in like regular season to playoff basketball that just catering toward being ready for the playoffs is the most important thing. So as much as it sucks dropping a bunch in a row, like the Sixers have bigger fish to fry, and hopefully those guys are coming back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're back in action tonight at 10. Tune in tomorrow, Sean, if you wanna preview this quick.
Yeah, we're gonna have ask some questions about Joel Embiid's knee to Dr. Rami Hashish and get a little insight on the meniscus, the treatment of that, and just the outlook going forward. So it should be interesting. We'll have that up and ready for you guys. So yeah, excited.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be a fun little conversation. So, we'll get you guys 3 days in a row here. So we'll get this out tonight, before the Sixers game tonight against the Jazz, and then we'll talk to you guys again tomorrow, just briefly with Dr. Ashish, and then Thursday morning again. We'll be back on our regularly scheduled program at 9:30 in the morning, doing our thing. So, if you guys want to check us out on Twitter at PickSwapPod, at Sean_Bernard1. Check me out, JSBrain17. Follow the YouTube, get this on all your podcast platforms. It's been a pleasure as always, Sean, and we'll talk to you guys soon.